Today I'd like to talk about Plexamp. It's a streaming system that works outside of the house. It also works inside of the house. And I think it will appeal to people who like the idea of Roon but don't like its price. Because Plexamp, and by association Plex, is free.
This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest. With products to fill every need and prices to suit every budget, AudioQuest is made for you. Visit audioquest.com for more information.
Before we start, how about some dubstep from 2010 from an artist called Scuba? Now, Triangulation isn't Skrillex type dubstep. It's less of a party in your face and it's far more cerebral. And I think it's an album that speaks to and from British housing estates and their sort of piss-stinking underpasses. And there's even one of those on the front cover. This is a very urban sounding record. But to enjoy this properly, you'll need a streaming system that can handle gapless playback, just like Plexamp. Now, in our 2020 video about Plexamp, we showed how Plex can index a library of locally stored music to make it available to the Plexamp smartphone app, no matter where that smartphone app is in the world. So when I'm in Portugal, I use Plexamp to stream from a hard drive, it's actually in my kitchen, connected to a Plex server here in Berlin. So effectively, the Plex server software and Plexamp create a private music streaming service. Now we're going to do a quick refresher on that in this video, but also want to bring later on Plexamp inside the house. I think that's going to be the meat of this video. So let's start by making a distinction between Plex and Plexamp. So Plex is like the name of the ecosystem and the server software that manages the library. And we can use the same Plexamp app that we use for out of the house streaming to tell the Plex server what to stream to a Plexamp endpoint inside of the house. So if you're a Roon user, you might think of Plex as the Roon core, and Plexamp itself, the app on the phone, is like a combination of Roon Arc and Roon Remote. So yeah, all rolled into one app. Now my Plex server has changed in the last couple of years. Nowadays, it's a Western Digital MyCloud NAS device that has around 3 terabytes of flash on it, and that sits in my kitchen. And I've been building this digital music library since 2003. Now the Plex server software that runs on that NAS scans it every day for new music. And that software is also responsible for adding album cover art and adding a layer of metadata to the library and also analyzing the library for its sort of audible qualities. But I'm not going to get into that in this video. Now you don't have to use a NAS to host your Plex server. Any PC or Mac will do, and in fact you can even use a Raspberry Pi. But I choose the MyCloud NAS setup because of its installable server module on top of a RAID array. Now, I recently learned about a terrific 90s ambient techno EP by an artist called Convextion with an X in place of the C. Now, it's called, let me get this right, RCNVX2, that's the name of the EP, but it's not on any streaming service and it's never seen a CD release. I think it came out originally on vinyl in the 90s and it's just been reissued again on vinyl this year. Now, I didn't spring for the record. I bought the FLACs from Bandcamp and dropped them onto my Plex server, so the NAS in the kitchen, to essentially make that EP part of my private streaming service. So that basically I can stream the Convextion EP to the Plexamp app on my smartphone when I pop up the road for a coffee, or I can download it to my phone before I leave the house to save on mobile data, and I download it inside the Plexamp app. And also, Plexamp lets us select the data rates for streaming and downloads independently. So I use 320 kilobits per second for mobile streaming, so when I'm out and about, but original quality for downloads. However, we can also use Plexamp in the home. So in theory, one instance of Plexamp can hand off the music stream to another instance of Plexamp running on the same network. So just like Tidal Connect, just like Spotify Connect. So we can go phone to phone, phone to MacBook, or phone to iPad. In fact, you can't do that with Tidal Connect, can you? But you can with Spotify Connect. So we can go from one sort of everyday device to another. So let's say I have Plexamp running on an iPad that's connected to a DAC over USB, and then I sit on the couch right here with my smartphone in my hand. So then Plexamp on my smartphone can request a music stream from the Plex server, the NAS in the kitchen, and then hand off that stream to Plexamp running on the iPad on my low board. Now the iPad then sends that digital signal out to the DAC for decoding to analog and then out through the amp and out through the speakers. So Plexamp running on the iPad is big enough to serve as a now playing screen. Remember we talked about this in the recent video. And it also shows what's playing next when it's turned horizontally. But I'll leave you to work out how to best keep the iPad's battery charge between uses. But it's not just phones and iPads, because Audiolab's 9000N is the second network streamer in the world to support Plexamp natively inside the box. Now the first was a Mega Money Lumen streamer, and interestingly, Audiolab tapped Lumen to develop the 9000N's streaming functionality. So yes, the 9000N, it's Roon ready, but it's also what I call Plexamp ready. And that's not Plexamp's or Plex's term or Audiolab's term. Plexamp ready is just kind of something I've made up to help you better understand what the bloody hell I'm talking about. However, the Audiolab version of Plexamp is what we call headless. So there's no user interface on the 9000N itself. It runs invisibly in the background to act as a Plexamp receiver only. So if we pull up our phone, fire up Plexamp, hit play on a song, and then select the 9000N as the destination device, the music will be handed off to the Audiolab. And the 9000N's non-touch display shows us now playing information like cover art, metadata, the file format, and its resolution. But, and this is really important, we have to remember to sign into Plexamp inside the Audiolab app first, otherwise this whole thing won't work. And the less I say about the Audiolab app, the better. I mean, it's basic and it gets the job done, but I wouldn't want to stream with the app. I'm just glad that I only have to use it to log into Plexamp once, and it's a one and done. Because sat next to Plexamp itself, the Audiolab's UI is what Australians might call very ordinary. So in this hardware setup, if we pull up Marcel Detman's conducted mix CD rip, that tells us that playback with Plexamp on the Audiolab, it tells us that it's gapless. And Neil Young's Le Noise lets us know that Plexamp supports up to 24:192. So high res is pretty much covered. I don't know about DSD, but I would doubt it very much. But yes, playback is also bit perfect. But there's a side note here with information from a patron. In that, the iOS version of Plexamp and the iPad OS version of Plexamp and the Mac OS version of Plexamp, those are all bit perfect capable. There's no issue with those. But Plexamp running on a Windows device or on Android, they're not bit perfect. Now for me, that's a minor niggle, but for some people it's a big deal, so you take your pick. Now you might be wondering, why not just use Google Cast inside Plexamp to stream to the WiiM Ultra? And that's a good question. Well, firstly, the WiiM's internal DAC, as good as it is, it's outclassed by the Audiolab's internal DAC. And we'd expect that given the price differential between the two. However, Google Cast isn't gapless. There are tiny gaps placed between the songs. I don't need to go over that ground because I've covered it many times on this channel before, but also I should point out that no, you're not hearing things. Google Cast is the new name for Google Chromecast. So why might we choose Plexamp streaming over Roon? Well, aside from the price differential, Plexamp is one app, not two apps, because as we know, Roon separates out its indoor use and its outdoor use between Roon Remote and Roon Arc. And unlike Roon Remote, there is a Linux version of Plexamp, and Plexamp is more reliable out in the street than Roon Arc when streaming. I don't know why that is, but sometimes on Roon Arc, if I click play on a stream, it just won't start. And that never happens to me with Plexamp. Also, Plexamp puts themed selections of albums on the app's home screen, and that's great for essentially rediscovering music that sits in my library that is awesome, but that I have forgotten about. Now, Roon used to have this feature on its home screen. It was in the side menu, but now you have to scroll all the way down to find it. And I've been hassling Roon ever since to put it back, put Discover back into the side menu. Okay, but what does Roon do better than Plexamp? Well, I think it generally looks nicer. Its magazine layout makes the universe of music feel much bigger. Roon also integrates Tidal and Qobuz, whereas Plexamp only does Tidal. And I think Roon is better at grouping multi-disc sets because Plexamp sometimes stuffs that up, and it's also better, Roon that is better in dealing with different versions of the same album, like different masters or vinyl rips. Roon has an expansive DSP powered back end that many people use for headphone correction and room compensation, and Plexamp doesn't have that. And Roon's signal path tells us exactly what's happening to the digital audio stream between the server and the streaming endpoint, and Plexamp doesn't do that. And Roon can stream to AirPlay devices, Chromecast devices, and Sonos devices, and Plexamp cannot. And perhaps the most relevant to this video, Roon's streaming endpoints don't momentarily vanish from the app as they sometimes do with Plexamp. I don't know why this is, but it's a little bit annoying. Anyway, I would like to thank Roon for sponsoring this video. So in case you're not sure, this video is not a review of Audiolab's 9000N. The 9000N is featured here as a prop to show how Plexamp is making its way into high-end hi-fi products, but also how it can be used in a home hi-fi environment to listen to the likes of Scuba or Convextion both inside the house and outside of the house using the same app. But Plexamp integration isn't just for big ticket hi-fi products like the Audiolab. There's a headless version available for the Raspberry Pi that's recently been folded into the Rupee OS. I think that's how you say it. Is it Rupee or Ropey? I never know. Anyway, that's the way to go if you want a Raspberry Pi based Plexamp endpoint. But if you don't have the patience to futz around with a Pi, know that Plexamp integration is already on WiiM's roadmap. And I think that's exciting because WiiM has the market penetration already to really push Plexamp over the top. Now lastly, Plexamp does have some advanced features that you can pay for, but none of those are a prerequisite for the basic functionality shown in this video. And if you like this video, you know what to do, and please consider subscribing to the channel if you like what we do here in general. And hit us up on Patreon if you'd like to buy Olaf and me a cup of coffee, because I think Olaf did a bang up job of the B-roll in this video. And let us know in the comments below whether you'd go for Plexamp or Roon, given the choice and given, I guess, unlimited budget really. But then again, Plexamp is free and Roon is not. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. 2212. or I can download it to my fart. So now you might be wondering, why would we use Plexamp instead of Roon? Well, so now you might be wondering, why would we use Plexamp instead of Roon? Well, first of all, Plexamp is one app, not two apps, as Roon, it divides its home use and its outdoor use between Roon Remote. Oh, God, can't get this right. So now you might be asking yourself, well, why would you use Plexamp and its streaming smarts instead of just using Roon? Well, aside from the price difference, God's sake, can't get this right. So why might we use Plexamp instead of Roon? Well, aside from the, oh my God, why can't I get this right?